You're listening to the Wordslinger Podcast, episode 13, Sean Platt and the Necessary Evils of Self-Publishing. This week's Wordslinger Podcast is brought to you by another podcast, the Self-Publishing Answers Podcast with me and Nick Thacker. You can check us out on iTunes, or you can check us out online at writehacked.com.
It's the Wordslinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here again. It means I'm alive, and it means that you're listening, which those are two things I'm really happy about. So this week, I've actually been waiting for this week. I'll be honest with you, because this week I'm actually talking to somebody who I could almost trace a lot of what I've done over the past year directly to what this guy and his two buddies on their podcast, to what the work that they've done. They've done a lot to influence me. And that, of course, is Sean Platt of the Self-Publishing Podcast, which he does with Johnny B. Truant and David Wright. I got into this. I actually started writing years and years and years before I'd ever even heard of a podcast. I mean, I wrote professionally, meaning for money, way back when I was 12 years old. So I've been doing this for a while. But when I decided I wanted to be an author, and, going beyond that, actually, because I decided I wanted to be an author years ago, decades ago. But when I decided I would treat being an author like the business that it is, things changed. I decided I'd have to do some study. I'd have to figure some things out. And I did. So I jumped right into figuring out the business of this whole thing. And, I've run a few businesses before, and I've got some creative businesses. I've been a copywriter professionally. I have an agency now. I do some coaching now. I do all kinds of things now. But the idea of running the author side of my life as a business, that didn't really occur to me for some reason. And I wrote and forgive me, I'm doing the swallowing thing again, but, I wrote my the first book that I actually published, I wrote in 2010, and I had a deal with a publisher who shall go unnamed, but, I after doing some basic math, I figured out that's not going to work out for me. I'm going to lose money on this deal. So I made a switch, and I made a few decisions. So I went with self-publishing, and then I made a lot of mistakes. There's a lot you get out of traditional publishing, advantages you get that you don't get as a self-published author. And I was still kind of playing to that old game. I was still playing to the, I had this expectation that if I built it, they would come. If I put that book out there, I'd get the audience. But there's a lot more to it than that. There's the marketing side of it, which I had a lot to learn about over the intervening years. And, in this conversation with Sean, that's some of what we talk about, kind of the necessary evils of the marketing surrounding our books. And this applies to all kinds of aspects of your life. Frankly, there are things that at times you're going to have to do that are not a lot of fun, but you can make them fun. I think there's a way to kind of dig in and find the joy in the event, especially when you are working toward an outcome, working toward a goal, or as Neil Gaiman would call it, you're working toward your mountain. So, at any rate, I'm boring. I'm not gonna keep you any longer. I want you to get as much out of this interview with Sean Platt as possible. It goes a little longer than our normal interviews, and there's a swear word or two in there. Sorry about that. But we're all grown-ups here, right? So take a listen. I enjoyed this interview with Sean a lot. He's a lot of fun to talk to. He's somebody that has been very influential on my work this past year. And I think he could be on yours as well. So check him out and stay tuned after the show. We'll chat a little more. Hey, everybody. So I'm really thrilled about this conversation because today I've got somebody on the show who, you played a big part in inspiring me to do a lot of what I'm doing now. So I've got Sean Platt on the show from the Self Publishing Podcast and from Sterling and Stone, which I almost screwed up. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks. That's great to be here.
Yeah, and normally all I ever hear you guys talk about is self-publishing, and I wanted to get you out of that for a second. And I know how important that is, but even more important and more of a driving force in that is story itself. And you guys have set yourselves up as a sort of story studio, and so I didn't think there would be anybody better to come on this particular show than you and talk about how story has impacted your life and your career. So thanks so much for being on, man.
Oh, my pleasure. I actually got business cards earlier this year for the very first time ever. And they just say Sean Platt, storyteller. And that's pretty awesome because
I'd take that title.
No, it was really great. And when we were Johnny and I were going up to Cleveland. Well, actually, Johnny lives in Cleveland. He tries not to brag. And it was for the Author Marketing Live thing. And I thought, you know what, we should probably get some business cards. Pretend we're professional. And so Dave and Johnny and me were all kind of deciding what to put on our cards. And we just really didn't know. I thought, founder, and I just hate that. It sounds so just pompous. And so I didn't want it to say founder. I kind of liked creative director, but not really. It also sounded pompous. And then I just said, why don't we just all say just storyteller? There's no hierarchy. There's nothing. It's just we're all storytellers. And they were like, yes, that's awesome. So they all just say storyteller. It's really cool.
That's beautiful. And so, I mean, what you guys do more storytelling than most of us probably realize, because it's intertwined with not just the fiction that you're writing, but with the whole process, like the marketing and everything else. Like, what role do you see it playing there?
Oh, story is in everything that we do. I think that, and this is a big division that Dave and I have, is that he tends to think of marketing as something that is, less than savory, something he doesn't really want to do or pay his mind. And, I really genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, think that not all marketing, some marketing is just big hairy balls, but good marketing is storytelling. Yeah. And not in the kind of storytelling where it's, evil or manipulative. It's manipulative in the same way that all stories are manipulative, because stories are designed to make you feel or to make you think or to push you in some way. And so is marketing. But the goal of marketing is to get, people who are inclined to love your work, in front of it. And that's what a good story does. A good story leads the reader to a certain point, a certain moment of revelation, a certain moment of clarity, a certain moment of passion where they're driven to do something or feel something or think something. And I think that stories done well do exactly that. Right now, my big writing job at the company is I'm writing a 60-part autoresponder. And it's very daunting. It's a very, very big task, because not only do we have to have the 60 emails, and of course we'll add emails over time. So that's the starter sequence. We also have to have the blog posts. So a lot of the emails link to other blog posts that we're also writing. So really there's like 100 pieces of copy in this. So it's equivalent to a really long book, which is kind of insane. But it's a story. It's a story broken apart by emails, and that is marketing. But it's a very, very just fantastic example of marketing as story.
So do you find that sort of storytelling as rewarding as the fiction?
No. Honestly, I don't. I really, really love telling stories and fiction. And because I don't, I've put it aside for way too long. I've owed the company. I'm really good at writing autoresponders, actually. I used to do it professionally. Yeah. And I used to have one for, I had a site called Ghostwriter Dad for a little while. and I wrote an autoresponder that was called 30 Days to being a better writer or being more successful as a writer. I don't even remember what it was called. But the open rate was around 94% with virtually no drop off. And the email ran for 34 emails. And it is the best numbers I've ever seen for open rates and responses in any industry. And I've seen a lot because I used to do it for a living. And so I'm proud of that, but no, I can't pretend that that's as fun as writing, like Unicorn Apocalypse, which I still don't have time to get to.
Yeah.
So no, it's not as much fun, but it is cool for sure. It's a really unique kind of storytelling, and it's a highly, highly specialized form of storytelling that takes a lot of craft and a lot of skill. So I like the science behind it. But no, it's not as much fun. If it was as much fun, it would already be done. I've owed it to all of us for a year and a half, and I haven't done it. And I'm only doing it now because I feel like a dick because it's been so long and everybody's waiting on me. Yeah. So I finally am just like, I'm battening the hatches and actually getting to it. But no, it's not as much fun.
So why not outsource that part if you don't really enjoy it?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Yeah. I do believe in outsourcing when appropriate, but I don't think you should ever outsource your voice. I don't think you should ever outsource your company's story. And, quite frankly, to get the skill level that I would want this autoresponder to be written with, it would cost me tens of thousands of dollars that I don't have. It makes more sense. This is such good autoresponder writing is some of the most expensive copy that you can pay for.
Yeah.
And so it would be out of proportion to spend it because here's the thing about autoresponders. Usually an autoresponder is designed to move a high ticket item, right? So if we had $1,000, how to publish your book thing, then it would make sense to outsource that because we would get a return on the investment. But our autoresponder is designed to move $5 books.
Yeah.
So spending, a substantial sum of money to do that when really it's our story and we should be telling it anyway. It doesn't make any sense. But we are storytellers, and we've taken our eye off of moving fiction a lot simply because we don't care. Like, we're not a revenue driven trio. We're about telling as many stories as we can and building the big business because we know that 10 years from now the work that we're doing now will pay dividends, and we're basically buying really cheap stock in ourselves. So we're not worried really about how many books we sell right now. We're worried about how many stories we tell. But having said that, we've been a little too lax this year, and so we need to put some of those mechanisms in place so that we start 2015 strong. And I've allowed myself a lot of distractions this year, like Fiction Unboxed. And
I was going to say, too lax, man. I mean, just judging by what I know of your year, holy crap.
Well, it's lax on actual, like, tickling the Amazon algorithms and selling that stuff. Like, that just hasn't been our focus. Our focus on, Fiction Unboxed, I think, was great. We've done a couple of things like, okay, here's a good example. So our latest book is Axis of Aaron, and that comes out November 13th.
Yep, pre-ordered.
Awesome, thank you. And that book is really awesome. Like, I'm very proud of it. Our editor, Jason, actually, just in between calls, right before I got on, I got an email from Jason, and he wants to write a guest post on Sterling and Stone about it because he now. Personally, I'll say that I think Jason is very overzealous, and I don't agree with what he's saying. But he loves this book so much that he sees it as a turning point in self-publishing. I don't agree with that at all.
Why not?
Because I think that he got to play a part in its editing, so he probably feels closer to it. You know what? Here's the analogy I would draw. There's this band I really, 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 really just love. They're called the V-Roys. They've been broken up for a long time. But I saw them, and I think it was 1998. They were opening up for this other guy I like named Steve Earle. And they were just crazy good. And I went there and I bought their 2 albums while I was at the concert. And I just always loved them. No one will ever love the V-Roys as much as me because they weren't at the show. right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just he felt a more personal connection to it, and he's edited all of our stuff, and so he's really seen our growth. Now, do I think it's the best book that we've written? Probably. Do I think it'll be the bestseller? No, I don't. I'd love to be wrong,
Yeah.
but I think genre fiction is easier for indie authors. This is the kind of book that, traditional publishers get all hot and bothered about, and then throw their weight behind. But we don't have their weight. And this isn't the kind of book that tickles the algorithms. It's just not. And I would love to be wrong. But it's also not. Another thing that Jason is saying is that, because he said, this is by far your best book personally. Out of everything I've edited from you, this is your guys' best. But it's also one of my favorite books I've ever read. Yeah. And so I appreciate that, but I also think that, again, it's coming from a personal place. And I think that even if it is good, as he's saying, I don't think that many people are paying attention to it. I don't think that we have enough power for the book for it to be a turning point in self-publishing.
When you guys talk about the books you've written on air, though, that's the one that seems to strike the most passionate note with, at least with Johnny. I mean, you I think I get the same vibe from you on the show as I'm getting now, is that I think you really like it. That's what it seems. But you're not sold that it's like the best ever.
Well, I actually think it is the best that we've done, that Johnny and I have done. I will agree with that for sure, wholeheartedly. Although I just have such an affection for the Beam. Like I love the Beam, and we're starting the Beam the first week of January. We're starting season 3, and I'm very, very excited about that. And I'm even trying to shut my brain down because I have an idea for a standalone novel on the Beam that I think is really, really cool, and I'm trying to muffle it because I know we've got other stuff to do. But I do think Axis is very good. It's not that I don't think it's good. It's that it doesn't matter how good a book is. Books don't necessarily do great because they're great.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. They can catch on because they're great. But it's still the marketing that matters, right?
Yeah, it's the marketing, and this book is demanding on a reader. It's not an easy read. There's a lot going on. It's a psychological fuck. And so, have you ever seen Mulholland Drive?
Yeah.
Okay, I would say, when we started, I had two prerequisites. I said I want this book to be literary as fuck, which I think we pulled off. And I said I want it to have a Mulholland Drive, Vanilla Sky vibe where you're not really sure what's going on and you're really unsettled. Yeah. And I think we pulled that off, totally. But were Mulholland Drive or Vanilla Sky box office wonders? No.
No.
One was an out and out failure, and the other one was, a modest earner, based on, indie projections. So, what I'm saying is that it's not the kind of book that is traditionally a home run. I think it will bond our true fans crazy. I think our true fans will love this book, and their respect for us will elevate for sure.
Yeah.
I think their respect for our quality writing will elevate, and I think among the self-publishing community, people who think that Johnny and I write too fast or we churn through a lot of stories, and so they these are people who haven't read our stuff, because it's a very, very small minority of people who have read our stuff who are they can't write. I think people write us off without actually reading our stories. But the people who read our stories, they have complimentary things to say. But I think that this book kind of proves a point that even people who haven't read our stories will have to admit that it's a good, solid book. It's the kind of book people would spend a year or more writing. And the fact that we did it quickly is not a reflection on its quality whatsoever.
So I know you guys put it on pause during Fiction Unboxed, right? And did that fuel some of the energy behind it when you came back to it?
Well, yeah, actually, that's a great question. We didn't put it on pause so much as we never really started it.
Yeah.
So it was a good point, because this was the first project that we call these Beats 2.0.
Yeah.
And it's the way that we structured the Dream Engine, and the way Oh man, the Dream Engine, the 1.5 for Dream Engine 2, those beats are insane.
Yeah.
The Scrivener file went from like 25 megs to over 300. So it's just this big whopping file. But those were born for Access.
Yeah.
And do you know the story behind Access?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I've been following you guys, on the
So,
show, so
oh,
I know what you've said on the show.
did we talk about I lose track of what I say when, but did we talk about the cover and how it was born?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You got it from Gurley, right?
Yeah, so it was a pre-made from Gurley. The story was not one that, like most of my stories, they're in my head and then I articulate them, or it's an idea like, hey, what if we do,
Yeah.
Downton Abbey with robots? But this wasn't like that at all. This was the cover, and then we thought, okay, what story can we tell that matches this cover naturally?
Yeah.
And so that was a really cool exercise. And I felt like the beats wouldn't be good enough for me to give them to Johnny in their regular state, which
Yeah.
is, just this happens and this happens and this happens. Like we had a point to prove. And if we were going to write a book that was literary as fuck and we weren't going to get torn apart because we wrote it cover first, which, like that's immediately something that our critics could tear apart. Like what hacks? They just picked a cover and wrote a book. Like we really had to make the book outstanding. And so I felt a responsibility to give Johnny the very best pre-production package that I possibly could. And so I spent a lot more time on the locations and the casting and actually telling that story and a lot of back history. Like I think Access probably has somewhere between 20 and 30,000 words of just backstory. That don't even make the novel. They're just there so that Johnny understands who these people are and where they came from. And so when he read those the beats, I guess it's more than beats. When he really absorbed the package, he really felt like it would be a mistake to start it because we only had enough time in the budget for 100,000 words, and before Fiction Unboxed started, and he knew this is going to take longer than that. And we can't just plan for it like we can our other stories. And he was right because it ended up being 150.
Yeah. And I can't wait to read it, actually. And I got to tell you, I love the idea of taking a cover and building a story around it. I'm tempted to do that myself now if I can ever get,
Well,
if I can ever get through the ideas I've already written out.
It's funny. There's like when Gurley was having like a fire sale on his covers, there were like 10 I wanted to buy, and I was just too late. Like I got a few of them, but a lot of them sold before, my email just went into him too late. And it's a bummer because it sucks. I do have a few, and I have stories like in sketch for all the covers that I have. And they're all literary as fuck. And it's just a matter of when can we get to them, because literally, we've got years and years and years worth of stories.
So those are your back pocket stories now. When you guys don't have any more ideas for Beam or something, you've got a lull. You can pull one of these covers out.
It's funny. Something that Amy Schubert said in the comments yesterday made me laugh. It was on Fiction Unboxed Day 4, and she said, wow, like this world is just so big. You could have staff writers that just do nothing more full time than write Dream Engine world stories. And it's so true. And the Beam world is getting that big. And it's just, it's like we have all these existing ideas that could go anywhere. And yet, new ones they arrive in avalanche.
You guys opened up the Dream Engine world and let other people in. And sadly, I did not participate in the recent anthology because I was tied up with my own stuff. But
that's good, man. Put your own stuff first.
Yeah, that was my idea too. Because I would love to put my name in there, mostly because I think there's a huge marketing benefit. Maybe we'll see how it does, but
we'll see. Yeah. I think that this is like a multi-year thing. I don't think we'll really see the fruits of this for a couple of years. But when we do, we really will. And I think that the stuff that's there early will benefit from having the most time on market.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. So you guys, have you considered opening up any of your other worlds? Like, would you ever open up the Beam?
Yeah, we've talked about that. We've talked about the Beam for sure. And I like the idea, but my problem with it is that it's the same problem with the Dream Engine world, but the Dream Engine world just seems a little more manageable because there's a lot of fantasy.
Yeah.
And, whatever. There's an engine that makes stuff, right? Like,
Right.
you can explain away a lot of things like that with canon not agreeing. But the problem with the Beam world is that it's technical. It's exacting. It's scientific. I think that we will absolutely open up the Beam world, but it's invite only, simply because we want to have some measure that, okay, we know that this world is going to be handled with respect, and even if they're not touching canon, they're adhering to the timeline and they understand all of that. So Ed Robertson has talked about writing a trilogy of Beam stories, and I would agree in like that.
Yeah.
I think that now granted we had a huge hand in it, but I think what Lexi did with The Future of Sex is phenomenal. It very much feels like a Beam story, and I think that's hard to do. The Beam is just a much, much harder world, and my worry would be that it would get diluted. Where I think the opposite is true with the Dream Engine. I think the more the merrier in that world. And I think that's important. I think that some of the decisions we made about the world were made because we were concerned about how to accommodate everybody. And
no, go ahead.
well, I think we were concerned. Well, you just have to interrupt me. Otherwise,
No, I don't. I'm going to let you talk, man.
But I think that the concern, we were very careful to say what rules can we build to give people the maximum amount of freedom. But the Beam wasn't written in that way. The Beam was written with like how dense can we make this? And we even had to explain it to ourselves. We wrote Plugged simply because we needed to explain the world to ourselves better before writing the sequel. And if we had to write a book for ourselves to understand it, like how complicated is it?
Yeah. I was going to say that you guys, so one of your inspirations was Tolkien, right? The Lord of the Rings world and that sort of thing. And he actually, I don't know if you even knew this, but I mean, he originally wanted that to be an open world. Like he created that whole world
I
that
didn't
other
know
people
that.
could create in it. So that's why I was so fascinated when you guys first started talking about it, because it's kind of like you're fulfilling, whether you knew it or not, you were paying homage to, one of the greats. So that was pretty cool.
No, I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And so how do you feel about open worlds, though?
Oh, I think it's fascinating. I actually just started Beyond the Gate, which is the anthology you were referring to. I just started it today. I promised to write the foreword, and I won't write the foreword without reading the book.
Yeah.
And so I started it, and the first two stories are from Monica and Amy, who both attended the summit, which was just the most amazing thing ever this last September. And so, I want to read their stories anyway. I feel certainly like I owe it to them. And I know that there's no way I'm going to ever be able to keep up with reading everything that people write in the world. Like, I can't even read the books that are in my queue. But this is the first release, and I want to, it's my way of saying thank you. Like, it's cool somebody wrote in our world. And I'm really enjoying it so far. It's awesome. I think that the idea of an open world is really, really cool because it's like the ability to publish fan fiction without having to ask permission or pay royalties.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really, really cool thing. I hope it works. I hope it takes off because I'd be happy to build another world if this one works for everybody.
So I like that you guys always sort of, you home in on your readers and the people who participated in these events, and it's like they become part of your group, your tribe, right? Do you feel, I don't know for sure, do you have more writers than readers in your circle, or how does it balance out?
That's a great question. I would say right now, because of the nature of Sterling and Stone, Smarter Artist is definitely our biggest imprint, just because of the podcast and because of Write, Publish, Repeat, and because of Fiction Unboxed. It just is. But having said that, I think we've done an amazing and maybe even unprecedented job of moving writers over to becoming readers.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of that because that is not easy to do. And we have, the number one advice I would give to writers is don't write for writers,
Yeah.
but we do it. And I think that we've managed to have like a pretty big following, which is really cool. But having said that, I don't want it to be that way. I want our fiction audience to grow, and I want our fiction audience to be substantially larger than our nonfiction audience because I want it to be proportional. Right now, I would say it's half and half. We have half people who are just exclusively fiction, and then half people that are exclusively nonfiction, and then we have a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
But having said that, we have one nonfiction line and 5 fiction lines. So I would really like us to have at least 2 to 3 times the number of fiction readers than we do nonfiction readers. But, again, that's why I'm building this autoresponder because it's time to start paying more attention to that. We've allowed ourselves to get diverted a lot. The podcast was only supposed to be a by the way thing.
Yeah.
And it turned into, like it's hard to ignore. The self-publishing podcast community is just fantastic. They're like my favorite people in the world. Like it's such a great, great, great community. And
very supportive.
It's supportive. It's enthusiastic. They allow us to be ourselves, which is really awesome. And I really, really love the SPP peeps. And so when they wanted us to write, publish, repeat, like, okay, like, did I want to write a nonfiction book? No. But did I want to serve that audience? Yeah, I totally, totally did. And so, I thought we were clever in the way that we put that book together, that it was very much more conversational than how to. And it highlighted our books as tangible examples, which, brought a lot of attention to them, which I like. But I was really glad to be done with it, for sure. It was supposed to be 50,000 words. It was 120. And exhausting to write because nonfiction is more difficult for me. It's more taxing than fiction. And I was glad to be done, and I didn't expect to do another one until this year. And when I got the harebrained idea that we could do fiction unboxed and show because the number one email that we were getting right after Write, Publish, Repeat is where the hell's that follow-up book? Where's the productivity book? And when we realized that we could just show people instead of writing another nonfiction book, that was a really, really appetizing idea to me because I don't mind, like I'm not shy, not in that context anyway. In real life, I'm actually painfully shy, which surprises most people. But in real life, like when I don't have the filter of a screen and like if I go to a party, like I don't want to be there and I'm the one in the shadows. Like I need my whoopee, I need my wife, or I need like Johnny, to feel okay talking to people. It's kind of funny. But as far as showing my process, that was scary, but a good kind of scary. And I knew it would help people, and that was awesome and exciting. But what I didn't anticipate was the amount of just insane time that the Kickstarter would take, and the actual project itself. A lot of the admin stuff was a lot harder. The getting the posts live every day and sending the emails every day, and all of that was just really, really taxing. And then on top of that, when it was all done, then we wrote a fiction unboxed book.
Yeah.
So like the thing that we weren't going to do anyway, because we were going to do this other thing, the other thing ended up being 3 or 4 times the time spent that we expected. And then we wrote the book anyway. So it was just it ended up being the most expensive thing that we've ever done. And then we followed it with the other most expensive thing we've ever done, which is Axis. So it's just been a really, really expensive year as far as the time that we're spending on things. And that's funny because they're not the things that we're doing weren't even on the plan, so the 2 most expensive things this year were not even on the docket this time last year. And so we're trying to be a lot more organized and make sure that we stick to our 90-day schedules, which is what I'm doing right now, is drafting out what stories we want to tell in Q1 next year, and what our production and what our publishing calendar looks like. And then we're just going to all like swear on our lives that we're going to stick to it.
I feel like I should be interrupting with a 99 Designs bad ad read or something. And, which I'm not sponsored by. So I'll send them to you guys. So, I mean, how do you balance those two masters though? You've got the self-publishing crowd, you've got the readers, and you want to attract more of the readers. Why take on more stuff for the one you've already got solid? Like, why not just kind of relax on those a little and start, focusing your energy on the readers more?
Well, we absolutely are.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do because that audience is ravenous.
Yeah.
They want, and it's hard because they want more than we can do. Mm-hmm. And yet it's also more profitable, and we have to pull ourselves back. So the best example here is the autoresponder. Yeah. I've got two autoresponders I could write. I've got one that is 60 pieces plus all the blog pieces. So let's say 100 pieces to put together. And if everything goes well, we're going to move a lot more $5 units.
Yeah.
All right. Then I've got the other one, the Smarter Artist autoresponder. That'll probably be 20 emails, maybe 30 pieces. And the things that we're moving there are, $100 Fiction Unboxed bundle, affiliate stuff for Aweber, which is recurring, and other things, blah, 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 right? And so you're talking tens of thousands of dollars of revenue on one versus hundreds of revenue equivalent on the other side. And the one with hundreds of dollars of revenue is probably 4 or 5 times harder to produce. And yet that's the one we're producing. Because again, we're not really driven by money. We're driven by what makes us feel good, and we're driven by legacy, and we're driven by telling as many stories as possible. So we are focusing on the readers a disproportionate amount of our time, but it doesn't always seem that way because the things that we do for the Smarter Artist are just so much more public.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see that, especially with the podcast being sort of the central focal point.
Right. And the LOL is really there for readers in a weird way. It's not for anybody really. It's for anybody who wants to know us a little bit better and see us in a very natural environment. That's more like an after hours show.
Yeah.
But we're trying to convert that more to the LOL audience. Because if you like Better Off Undead, you will like the LOL stuff.
Yeah.
And so we've done a very poor job of doing that so far, but we would like to do a better job in 2015.
So why do you think, because it seems like in the self-publishing community, everybody ends up kind of running pretty much the same obstacle course. Like we get into it, we discover the community, and then we suddenly want to have our own podcast or write our own own nonfiction book. So why do you think that is?
Because I think there's a real human tendency to say, "Oh, that person's doing it. I want to do it too."
Yeah.
It's validating. Podcasts are really cool because you get to talk to other people and you get to get smarter faster.
Yeah.
Because you're talking to them, right? And I love our shows with guests because I always leave with a couple ideas. And it's kind of funny because I think we have a very rare podcast where the people tend to like our shows with guests a little bit less.
Yeah.
And it's just because they want to hear our banter. They want to hear our bullshit. They want to hear Dave lose his shit about something. And like that's just become part of the dynamic. But I think that we have to be careful not to do too many where it's just us because I don't think we can underestimate the value that you get from other people. We're shooting really high. We actually made a list the other day of 6 dream guests for the SPP.
Yeah.
And we're gonna try to get those guests, and they're all 6 are impossible. But we're gonna try anyway. Yeah, we're gonna try anyway, and figure that we really, really want to elevate what the SPP does next year.
Yeah.
We want to be a little more organized. I think that the off-topic thing is awesome but I think that it could be a little too much. And I would like to be a little more together on what we're doing next
Yeah.
year. I want to grow the show in quality. We're also looking to do a daily podcast,
Wow.
which will be we're actually thinking of doing 2 daily podcasts next year, but they'll be smart. They're both smart. One is just daily fiction, and we have a very very deep catalog to pull that off. And the other one is a daily podcast for the smarter artist. And there are a lot of ways to pull that off, but we have to be very very smart about it.
Yes, because
And
that's a huge commitment.
yeah, it's a huge commitment, but I actually think we can pull it off with the design that I have in mind. And it's just the reason for daily, in case you're wondering, is just that there's exponential growth.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to grow a daily podcast than it is to grow a weekly podcast. And so it would be the very best basically those 2 podcasts would be the very best marketing vehicles that we would have for the rest of our work. So there's a lot of like ninja ideas that I have for, how to get out in front of a lot of readers. But I think that if we could just do one thing that's really, really amazing, it could circumvent a lot of that. It could just do the heavy lifting for everything. And I think that the indie fiction podcast is a great idea because there is no daily fiction podcast, and we have enough content to keep that going for a very, very long time. And we're already producing plenty, more at all times.
It'll be interesting to see how many people start aping that format once you
Well,
guys are out there.
well, right, and I think that they will. So we're very careful to. In fact, this was going to launch, a couple of months ago, and I pulled it. It went on YouTube and it went on the blog, but it never went to iTunes because it's not ready yet. It's not good enough yet.
Yeah.
And so I have a few ideas on how to make it much better, but if it's not good enough, you get one shot on iTunes.
Yeah.
And if you're not, SPP is a rare exception. It's grown very, very well by word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen often. Podcasts don't really grow by word of mouth. Like it's hard. That's a hard thing to do. But if you launch well, and iTunes starts promoting it for you, that's kind of the holy grail. And so I want to make the indie fiction podcast good enough and big enough that we can do that. And so that's the plan there. And the same with the smarter artist. If we get a daily podcast that is strong enough, it will really, really promote the SPP and the whole line.
That's going to be interesting. That's exactly what I needed was one more damn podcast to put on my
Right.
No, actually, I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. And I started this podcast mostly because I saw it as an excuse to talk to people that people I admire or people that I thought I could learn from or whatever. And I wanted to differentiate it from self-publishing because there's so many of those out there. And maybe I didn't go far enough out, but I've had some interesting people on the show. So we're closing in on the gap here, but who's been like your favorite guest on the show so far on Self-Publishing Podcast?
That's a great question. I don't know. I feel very comfortable with the people that I again, it's the shy part of me, the more the better I know somebody, the more fun I naturally have with them. I love our little crew, Ed Robertson, Joanna, David Gaughran, like these are just smart people I really respect. I love Lexi. I wish we could get her back on the show, but she's just kind of much more comfortable in the shadows.
Yeah.
But I like her brain, and I like how unashamed she is.
Have her pull like a Cyrano de Bergerac. She's talking in someone's ear. And just have a puppet of her sitting there.
Yeah, it's just it's not the same. And even having her on the podcast, she's a little different than she actually is.
Yeah.
It's like she's a little more restrained in real life. It's like she's trying to play to a role on the podcast. She's a little more over the top. In real life, she actually can be a lady. So I like her a lot. You know, I like Tucker because he riles Dave up so much,
Yeah,
and
that
he's
was
just
hilarious.
yeah, he's just one of the smartest guys I know.
Yeah.
And so I always like he's one of those people who it's impossible for me to talk to Tucker and not feel a little bit smarter when I'm done. And I like that. Again, Fiction Unboxed was born in his kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, it never would have happened without a very specific conversation. God, who else?
You've had you guys have had some really interesting guests on.
Ray,
Oh,
you know,
Ray,
like
yeah.
Ray's become like that's funny because the right guest, they just become part of our crew. You
Right.
know, they just become, oh, well, now we'll reach out to this person.
They're
And
FOS, friend of show.
totally. And yeah, Ray's reading Crash right now.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
awesome.
David Lawrence, we have not announced this, but David Lawrence is reading Axis of Aaron.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And
That's going to
so
be cool.
yeah, it's gonna be really cool. Like I love Ray, but I don't think his voice is right for Axis. You know, it's a little too dark. And Axis, you know, it's literary as fuck, right? And David Lawrence is literary as fuck.
Yeah,
So
who better than the Puppet Master to read something dark?
yeah, no, I just think it's perfect. I think that he's going to do a really great job, and we just gave him the final a couple days ago, and he's starting on that. So you know, again, that was a friend of the show.
Yeah.
So, but that's like what you were saying. I think it's important if you have the vehicle, use it. You know,
Yeah.
I like that you called it an obstacle course because it is. You know, most people are not going to make money on their podcast.
Yeah.
You know, but if you can use it indirectly to refine your craft, which we absolutely do. You know, it's not just the podcast was born as exactly what it is, and you'll notice. I mean, we've done it rather awkwardly,
Yeah.
but we've changed the messaging, you know, right after the bumper music, because it's really important. I feel that people don't follow everything that we do because it's not advice. And I wish if there was one wish that I had for the podcast more than any other, it's almost that like I'm flattered that people, you know, mimic some of the stuff that we do, but it's a mistake a lot of the time
Yeah.
because our goals are not the same as everybody else's goals. And you know, genre hopping is probably the best example of that. If we wrote in a single genre, we would make substantially more money than we're making right now.
Yeah.
But that's not our goal.
Right.
Like our goal is not trying to make money right now. Our goal is trying to build a really, really wide platform that we can then, you know, go vertical later. Because we could build that skyscraper and just keep building it taller and taller and taller. But instead, we're laying concrete on the whole block
Right.
so that we could grow it up later. And most authors, like 99 out of 100 authors, are not interested in doing that. And so they really should be sticking to the same genre. And they see what we're doing and think, oh, I want to do that too. But without knowing our why, which is the really, really fundamental question, why are we doing what we're doing? Then you get to the wrong side of the equation. And so that worries me a little bit when people are copying things, but not for the right reason. It's not like I feel like there's any, you know, trade secrets there. Like we're very transparent about what we do, but that why is really important. And I don't want people to make mistakes or jeopardize themselves in that way. And the show was always started on that premise, you know, like this is just three guys talking about what they're doing. And I love that it still has that vibe. You know, 2.5 years later, it's still really just three guys talking about what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I can only speak for me personally, and maybe a few other folks, but I know that coming in on this, I started kind of copying and mimicking what you guys were doing just because I didn't have another plan in place. So, but you know, I've come to appreciate the approach you guys took, and I've veered into my own path from that. But you guys were foundational for a lot of what I'm doing now. So, you know, as we wrap up, I just wanted to say that I am incredibly grateful to you and Johnny and Dave, and for the stuff that you've given us, the gift that you guys give us every week. And I'm really grateful for Write, Publish, Repeat, and for and I love your fiction too. So I mean, it all works out.
See, and that's my favorite. That just makes me so happy.
Yeah. So thank you so much. It's profound, actually. When I came into this, I did not treat this like the business it should be. And I wrote my first book.
And that is the biggest mistake that authors make.
Yeah, every time. Yeah. And I work with authors now. Like I coach people now, and that's the first thing. That's the first step, is to establish like what is the business. So
yeah, and that's awesome. And I will say that that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of with the work that we've done with SPP and Write, Publish, Repeat, and even Fiction Unboxed, is to kind of get writers thinking in that way that, like, look, this is if I'm going to feed my family with this, then it has to be about the reader and not me, and I have to think about the bottom line. And those are just, I love ticking those boxes. Like I feel a little shy on the Entrepreneur's Almanac, that we do on Sundays.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, this is what I'm telling my team.
It's breaking the rule. It's breaking your "this is not advice" rule.
Well, it's sort of, but it's like letting people look into the way that I communicate with the team.
Yeah.
And that's a little vulnerable, But I feel like if people are watching that with the right filter. And because what makes that okay is that I have more time, where on the podcast, like I don't want to irritate Dave, so I don't want to talk too much about the why, because he'll just start rolling his eyes and getting annoyed. But on those company meetings, on those keynotes, it's a chance to explain why, because I'm talking to the team. So that why is in place. This is what we're doing, and this is why. And so I think that it's an archive. It's like, I feel a responsibility we're building this really cool thing. And this is kind of like a development diary. It's just like we wrote, one of the extras you can get on Axis of Aaron is the development diary, that Johnny kept a diary every single day with just a few hundred words about that day's writing. And it really tells the story behind the story. And I think that Sterling and Stone is going to be a massive company someday, 5 to 10 years from now. And the Almanac is our company's development diary.
That's awesome. Everyone's going to want to do that now. I'm going to hop off this call and start my development diary right now.
It's funny because it's true.
So, well, hey, thanks so much for taking the time, man. I know how punched in the face slammed you are, and I really appreciate it. And, I know that my listeners will too, both of them. And, we're going to tune in every week and listen to you guys on the Self-Publishing Podcast, and probably every day once you release the new one. But if you want to learn more about Sean and Johnny and Dave and the podcast, you can go to selfpublishingpodcast.com, and you can, even better, go check them out at sterlingandstone.net. Where you can learn about the books and get on mailing lists and get those autoresponders he's building. I can't wait to start seeing those. You used a word in one of your emails today that cracked me up. What was it?
Abby?
No. Oh, hell. I'll never remember. Something about dinosaur porn. Yeah, that's what it was.
Oh.
Like, how often do you get to use dinosaur porn in an official communication?
Oh, so. You know what's funny about those emails is that I hate writing those emails, which I always pass it off on Johnny. I'm like, you write the email. I don't want to write the email. I really don't like writing the marketing emails.
Yeah.
And yet every time I do, I have fun. Like 100% of the time, once I'm done, I'm like, that wasn't so bad. That was fun. And they get a great response. They convert. Like, it's not, I just because it's like, I really have, my writing time at this point is pretty precious. Like, I just don't get that much time to write. And an email like that, shockingly, takes a long time to write. It's not long by any stretch. And yet I could have written 2,000 words of fiction in the same amount of time, easily.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, like, I don't have time to write 2,000 worth of fiction, but I have to go write this thing.
Necessary evil.
But yeah, it's a necessary evil. But I'm
Yeah.
excited. I really want to see if that New York Times play works. It'll be cool. And, again, every time I do it, I get to love the SPP community a little bit more because they always step up. They're awesome.
Yeah. I'm,
So
I'm,
yeah.
I'm checking into it. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Sean. I
Oh, my,
really
my pleasure,
appreciate it.
Kevin. And you're a great interviewer. You did a great job.
Thank you
So
very much.
my
That's high
pleasure.
praise. I'm quoting that on the site from now on.
Awesome. You should.
All right, everybody, check out Sean and team at sterlingandstone.net, selfpublishingpodcast.com, and be sure to subscribe to them on iTunes and give them lots of stars. And hey, while you're there, you might want to subscribe to my podcast too. I could use stars. So take care, everybody. Well, that was Sean Platt. I feel like I don't even have to say anything else. Just period, the end. Sean Platt. It's great having him on the show. Actually, he's a lot of fun to talk to. I love listening to their podcast, the self-publishing podcast, because it's kind of inspiring, and and they're funny, and and they give good advice. But there's something about the way they interact with their listeners and with their readers that's it's he goes on. They all go on about how they're not there giving advice. Don't do it our way. Do it your way. And I fully agree with that. That's the smartest plan is find the way that works for you and repeat that. And but the thing is, the way that they interact with their audience is I would think a perfect model for how most people should strive to interact with their own. As an author, I try to do that. I mean, I try to make sure that I respond to every email, that I respond to if people are interested in the show, if they're interested in my books, if they're interested in blog posts, I want to interact with them and talk to them about whatever's got them excited. So that includes you, because you're listening, which is my favorite thing about you right now. So at any rate, I'm so happy that I got a chance to talk with Sean, and I think I'm going to try to get him on the show again someday. Just because I like it. Actually, what I told him after the show was I want to do something big enough that those guys would have me on their show. So we'll see how that works out. So at any rate, I'm so glad that you tuned in. If you want to learn more about Sean and Johnny and Dave and the podcast and their books, you should definitely go check them out at selfpublishingpodcast.com, or you can check out the Sterling and Stone website at sterlingandstone.net. And that's where you'll find everything they've written. I mean, so far as I recall, everything they've written is actually available on sterlingandstone.net, which is, a useful resource all around. If you're a self-published author, especially, go check that out. If you are a self-published author and you're listening to podcasts, one, I totally recommend the self-publishing podcast. You have to listen to that. It's got to be on your list, along with Creative Pen and dozens of others. I could give you a whole list. One in particular, which you probably heard at the beginning of the show, is the Self-Publishing Answers podcast that I do with Nick Thacker. Nick's a brilliant guy. He's got the savvy to pull this off. I think if anybody's going to make the run with it, it's going to be him. And I'm pretty happy to have aligned myself with him. So go check us out. You can find us on iTunes if you search for Self-Publishing Answers. And that podcast is available, to subscribe to. You can also find it on Stitcher, which I have not figured out how to do Stitcher. I don't know where I went awry. I thought I had everything set, but I need to get this show on Stitcher. Sorry, Stitcher listeners, if you're having to tune in some weird way. You can also check out the podcast, the Self-Publishing Answers podcast, on Nick's site, writehacked.com. I'm going to say that again without the throat issue. Writehacked.com. And if you want to learn more about me and my work, my books, the podcast, anything else I'm involved in, definitely check me out on kevintumlinson.com. You can leave a voicemail for this show, actually. You can get in touch with me, leave a voicemail, send an email at kevintumlinson.com/podcast, where you can either dial in. I have a phone number. Basically, you enter your phone number in Google Voice will call you to let you leave a message. Or I've got SpeakPipe on there, so you can actually leave a message directly from your computer. So that's pretty much that's it for this week. I'm thrilled that you guys are here, and tune in next week and you'll hear even more cool stuff.
Word Slinger.